We've had a plane crash at Pearson Airport, and we're gonna start there looking at that because it's very interesting, and we're gonna look at the broader number of plane crashes compared to historical number of plane crashes. And no, I'm not trying to blame Trump. I'm just trying to say weird. It's weird. It's a weird situation happening. Gold in Fort Knox. What's going on with that? We're going to talk about that closer to the end of the show. EU leaders want their own peace summit, and it'll have robots and hookers and things like that. AI probably, right? Biggest fraud in history, Social Security fraud. Yes. Elon Musk has found millions of people over the age of 100, more than 20 million people over the age of 110, which is just unbelievable, right? And so that's probably a huge amount of fraud and waste. Carney did an interview with Rosemary Barton. Yesterday I said, I really want to see the part where he loses his cool because it looks like he really loses his cool. I think they scrubbed it. I think they took it out of the interview because there's a hard cut in the interview itself, I think. So I saw the original source and it does the same kind of hard cut, but they stay on a similar topic. And he says, no, we're super different. He's a skier. I'm a snowboarder. He plays left wing. I'm a goalie. It's very weird. It's a very strange thing. Pierre won't commit to getting rid of media subsidies. He says, oh yeah, we're going to reduce those. What? I thought that we were going to remove the CBC. Anyway, it's a very interesting, situation that everybody finds ourselves in. I think that like people are not upset. I don't know about upset. Some people seem to be upset about Trump. There are certain things that I'm not sure how it's all going to play out yet. I'm willing to see how it's going to play out yet, but there are certain things I don't like for sure. We'll see, right? There's a golden pager, I think, all sorts of interesting things like that. But I don't know how it's all going to play out. So we're going to have to see. There are certain things I like. I like DOGE. I like a lot of the things that are going on with that. I'm frustrated by the Canadian media, the Canadian leadership. There's nobody who's really getting out there and being able to gain traction anyway. And is that because the media doesn't give them any kind of play, or is that a different reason? I'm not sure. But they're saying, Bernier is saying a lot of the same things that are making Trump popular. Is the message important, or is it something else? And so I really don't know, but it's an interesting situation because I feel like those policies should be really popular. And because they're not, we're forced into a situation where we're kind of nonsense, right? Like we're talking about changing 2% of something, whereas Trump's going in and finding almost $1 trillion, $100 billion so far in waste. And they're speculating that they're going to find trillions. And I'll show you that today. So it's really interesting. Nobody in Canada, the leadership hasn't said anything about, wow, that's a lot of waste they're finding in the US. They haven't said anything one way or the other, right? Poilievre is doubling down on axe the tax, build the houses, all the rest of it. And I think that it's missing an obvious opportunity that's staring everybody in the face, but they're trying to paint Trump as the bad guy. And that doesn't work. You can't do both. You know what I mean? You can't say, hey, look at all this great stuff that he's finding and look at the waste he's finding, and also paint him as the bad guy. So we're watching all of the parties paint Trump as the bad guy. And I just want to go back and do a little bit of history as well. 1936, Hitler in Berlin had the 1936 Olympics. 2026, Trump gets the 26 Olympics. And by 1938, the war drums were beating, right? And so Hitler was very politically successful. Like if you ignore this fact, then you're going to have a bad time. Hitler was very, very politically successful. And so when they say Hitler is a lot like Trump or the vice versa or whatever it is, I think they want to make sure things play out the same way. Does that make sense? I feel like we're replaying history a little bit here, and people can't see the forest from the trees because they're so drunk with victory. like, oh, we're winning. Look at all the billions we're removing from DOGE and all the rest of it. And I think that other people are setting up because they're like, oh, we've done this before. We know the playbook for this. We can take this one down. I'm just saying. Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, here is Joe Rogan. He says Canada is being walked into communism. We're on a road to legitimate communism. And he's very clear, and he's not mincing words about who is to blame for this. It's Justin Trudeau. He says, yeah, Justin Trudeau is the a-hole who did this. Here we go.
Every government wants to eventually completely and totally control its population because it's way easier for them to make money. And that's what they like to do.
Yeah.
They like to make money. They like to be in bed with the lobbyists and the military-industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and they like to fucking impose their will on people. And if you can't express yourself and say, hey, this is fucked up, this is crazy, why am I doing this? Like, these studies show that you're not correct. Like, if you can't say all those things, which right now you can't do in Canada, it's not the same. Like, their ability to express themselves on the internet has been severely limited. It's real weird, man. It's real weird, and it's happening right. You could walk there. If you wanted to, you could walk there. And it's fucked. It's like...
But don't walk here. Don't walk here. It's very cold. You could get frozen to death.
It's on the same patch of land as us, and it's fucked. It just shows you what can happen here if you don't have the right laws. Because people like that fuckhead, Justin, they pretend...
You guys are on first name basis.
Yeah, that cocksucker. They pretend that they're... And I don't talk this way about anybody.
No, I'm really surprised.
I genuinely despise people like that. And I think it's good to say it publicly because people need to understand like what these people are doing. These people are leading you on the road to legitimate communism. Like he's leading that country on a road to legitimate communism. It's very dangerous. And I think most Canadians are fed up with it at this point. It's just like the party up there has so much control. And he's been forced to resign. So he's got to step down. And just hopefully they don't get some new slick talker to con them into the same old bullshit. Hopefully someone comes along that has like real meaningful change.
Ah, man. Darn, Joe. I mean, I think he's accurate in describing where we're at. And the people who are vying to take over, Mark Carney and or Pierre, are both not very slick talkers and not offering very much change. And people say, oh, Pierre Poilievre's offering big change, big change. On a lot of the big things, he's not offering a lot of change. A lot of the structural things about our government, Trump came in with a machete and he said, we're going to cut the crap out of this government. Right? We are going to cut the foreign aid. We're going to cut the DEI. We're going to cut all this crap. And he's put an action plan in place and it's actually done it. It looks like it's done it. I don't know if it's actually done it, but it looks like it's done it. And Poilievre's coming in and saying, we're going to tinker on the sides. We're going to axe the tax. We're going to axe one tax. We need an entire up and down, complete full audit of all the money going out and why, and who's getting it and who's bringing it back. We need to make sure that Social Security isn't being screwed around with like it's being screwed around with in the States. Basically, all the red flags that are being raised in the States should be fully investigated here. And if there's no talk of that, then these people are not serious about getting a handle on what's going on. Because to me, it seems obvious if the people, the fraudsters, the other people can do it in the United States, plus all of the Arrive scam stuff that shut down Parliament, the green slush fund, Arrive scam, the insider deals, all of that stuff equals a massive scandal of just epic proportions. And everybody's pretending that the real question here is Canada first. The real question here is Team Canada response. The real bad guy here is Donald J. Trump being mean about tariffs. Well, maybe he's highlighting massive fraud that we have a problem with. Maybe he's highlighting issues with our own government by highlighting issues with his own government, right? And us sitting here and pretending that Donald Trump is the bad guy is maybe damaging us too. No response is a response. If somebody says you should clean up your garden, or I'm going to call the city or bylaw or whatever it is, and you choose not to clean up your garden, then when the bylaw comes over, your non-response turns into a ticket. Sometimes. Anyway, I feel like our parliament, our leaders, our representatives at every level are pushing this bullshit Team Canada garbage and are not picking the obvious, ripe, low-hanging fruit of, hey, look at all this waste. We've got a whole bunch of waste too. I'm going to champion getting rid of this waste right here. CBC, Poilievre's talking about CBC, but it's empty. It feels empty. It feels like he's tinkering around the corner. And you'll see what I mean when we talk about it in just a minute. So there's lots to get to. I've already said that. Here's the plane crash. Let's talk about that. Libs of TikTok says breaking Delta Airlines plane crashes at Toronto Pearson International Airport. So that's not great. I was like, ooh, that's not good. Delta. I've been on Delta planes. So I hope that everybody's okay. And yes, everybody lived. There's a couple of people in critical. I think there's 8 people who are injured, 2 or 3 critical. That's what I've heard. I heard that one of the critical is a child, but I don't know if they've lived or died. I don't know any kind of update from yesterday. I'll tell you what I've got here. Mark Nixon says, New video emerges from the Delta Airlines crash at Toronto Pearson. Passenger footage shows the crash from their window. Thick black smoke billowing into the sky. At least 8 injured, extent unknown. So here's just part of this.
Yeah.
It's too far away to see. This one's kind of hard to see. Mark Nixon says at least 8 plane crashes have occurred since Trump took office, averaging 1 plane crash every 3 days. And so that's Washington, Pennsylvania, Washington, Alaska, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, Washington State, Alaska, Arizona, California, Georgia, and more. And on average, you see 1 to 3 plane crashes a year if there's a fatal commercial plane crash. Now, this one doesn't fit the fatal commercial plane crash because nobody died. A lot of people think it's a crosswind, but we've actually got pretty good footage of the plane coming in. Yeah, here it is here. So this is very clear footage of the plane landing. And if you've ever watched Mayday, I've talked about this before. My goodness, if you haven't watched Mayday, don't start. But if you've watched Mayday before, you know that it is very rare that something goes wrong mid-flight. Like usually something goes wrong mid-flight because of, a breakdown of something like that. But usually most plane crashes are caused during the takeoff or the landing. Those are the 2 times where shit can really go sideways. And so for me, if I'm ever flying, takeoff and landing are the things that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, hello, stranger next to me. We're going to hold hands now because, I just want to hold your hand. And people are very open to that, by the way. So I don't like takeoffs and I don't like landings. And it is what it is because I know about Mayday. And here is a landing that looks like, we're on the ground. And then, well, it's not as good as you think. So here you go.
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh, no.
So the plane landed and it kind of bounced. Like you could see he hit way harder than he anticipated. Some people were saying as a pilot, he wasn't even at the part where the flaps were down. Like he wasn't slowing down yet, right? He didn't realize how low he was. Unlimited L says new footage shows passengers walking on the ceiling to escape the Delta crash in Toronto. 15 people, including a child, were injured, at least 2 in critical condition. High wind speeds have been reported in the Toronto area. 80 people were on board the plane and safely evacuated. No casualties reported. So here's on the inside of the plane.
Everything, drop it. Come on. Don't take your video. Step on the right. On the right.
Holy fuck. Holy fuck. Holy fuck. Oh my fucking God.
This guy's in shock, by the way. He's walking out of a plane crash that he just survived. Now, I mean, it's not really like it's a plane crash, sure. But when you imagine a plane crash, you're not imagining like you're on approach. You know what I mean? Like you're like, okay, everything's normal. Everything is not normal. Oh my gosh, everything is not normal. Right. So like, it's like a bad car accident, but like you weren't coming down like that Learjet that came down like a missile, right? Like there's a difference between those two things. So when I think, plane crash, but this guy's in shock for sure. And I do not disparage him being in shock, like holy smoke. Yeah, obviously. There's more footage of this as well. Natalia says this is an absolute back-breaking landing. Wow, there was far more going on here than just last-minute wind gusts. This guy had no idea how high he was. Spycraft says, yeah, you're right for sure. You can tell by his angle of descent. He wasn't even on outboard landing flaps yet. And Natalia says, definitely something with instruments or a pilot. Nothing normal about that video. So I'm not a pilot or anything to that effect. So take it all with a grain of salt. Here are firemen jumping out of the plane as it ignites again. You can see the flames over here. So crazy stuff going on. And Leah True Crimes shares this: 1.4 million to promote DEI recruitment in the aviation industry. No, So this is from July 3rd, 24 to March 31st, 26. Through this 21-month systemic change project, Elevation Aviation will scale their feminist response and recovery project to further advance women's equality, safety, retention, and representation in leadership and decision-making roles in the aviation industry. It will scale to a pan-Canadian reach, Prairies, Ontario, Pacific, Northern, addressing equality for women and underrepresented groups. The project will apply a DEI lens to focus on 3 key activities: DEI benchmarking, consulting and training with clients, evaluate client succession plans to address power imbalances, and analyze HR and recruitment policies to ensure companies are safe, welcoming, and developing internal talent for long-term retention. So there you go. And I mean, it's $1.4 million to shoehorn in DEI policies and elevate people who may not be qualified. They just tick a DEI box, and that's not good. People can't do that. That's not a good way to run anything, because you're not going to get talented people. You're going to get people who have no idea what they're doing. Right? So I don't know if that plane crash was caused by anything that was involved in that funding, but it's just interesting that our government is funding that kind of stuff and making plane travel statistically less safe at the same time. Is correlation causation? Who knows? Patrick Webb says that means those two rising, correlation versus causation, meaning those two things happening at the same time. They changed this thing and then this happened. Did changing this thing impact this thing happening, or were those just two things that happened randomly at the same time? Right? That's what I just said. Patrick says, let's move on. Let's talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. And Patrick says $4.7 trillion in the U.S. Treasury payments were made without a filled out TAS field, making tracking nearly impossible. And I've got a little bit more about what that is. Byron says $4.7 trillion. DOGE just found that standard financial process was optional and not required for nearly $4.7 trillion in U.S. Treasury payments, making traceability of these payments almost impossible. The gravy train in the United States is over. Accountability is there. The swamp is being drained. And here's Department of Government Efficiency. They say the Treasury Access Symbol, TAS, is an identification code linking a Treasury payment to a budget line item, standard financial process. In the federal government, the TAS field was optional for $4.7 trillion in payments and was often left blank, making traceability almost impossible. As of Saturday, this is now a required field, increasing insight into where money is actually going, thanks to U.S. Treasury for the great work. So there you go. Now you have to actually allow people to be able to audit the payments that are going through, and you have to have a TAS field filled in. So that's like a good thing, right? That's a positive change. Farm Girl Carrie says, I guess we should be asking this, right? If Social Security Administration has over 60 million more eligible Social Security numbers than the entire U.S. population, what does that mean for our voting rolls? So I've been talking about this for a while, but yesterday or the day before, it was shown that there are millions of people over the age of 100 voting eligible for Social Security. So does that mean that those eligible for Social Security millions also translate into voting millions? Can they vote with those valid Social Security numbers and identification information? Interesting, right? If the Social Security Administration has over 60 million more eligible Social Security numbers than the entire U.S. population, what does that mean for our voting rolls? I think that when they say voter turnout is low, they have full control. Like they have 100% full control of that whole thing, right? And they can do any outcome they want. And I think they can do that here too. And all it takes is time and the ability to change numbers after, right? And the ability to do that is achieved with mail-in voting, as well as having to reconcile out-of-area votes, right? So you've got somebody who votes in an out-of-area voting place. They need to make sure that the person didn't vote at their home voting place, and also, it's just once or whatever. And so you've got two votes that then can become one, right? You say, oh, this person voted out and then in, and so we have to take one of their votes, not both. And other ways to manipulate. Here's all these mail-in ballots, right? Like we've got all these mail-in ballots to count now. How many did they win by? Okay, so we need 4 million mail-in ballots to counter that. Got it. right? And so they have a way to get an idea of the final total they need to beat, and a way to, after the fact, adjust the totals through voting, through mail-in voting, through things like that, right? And that's what they do. And so how does the Social Security aspect play into that, right? Here is Elon Musk. He says there's far more eligible Social Security numbers than there are citizens in the United States. This might be the biggest fraud in history. And the power it would give people who knew about that to control things is immense, right? Like, if you can dismiss them as crazy, then it's unchallengeable power. You don't have, you have enough to swing any vote you want all the time, every time, right? So Jeff says 395 million Social Security numbers in the database versus 335 million citizens, more than 20 million over the age of 100, more than 15 million over the age of 110, fraud potentially at massive levels, but also huge implications for our elections. Easily fixed, but it wasn't, which is exactly what I think Poilievre is going to do. Not fix low-hanging fruit, because he's not even talking about it now. Adam says, breaking, the Department of Education just uncovered that billions in taxpayer funds have been misallocated or untraceable due to poor tracking systems. For years, the government funneled billions into education spending without proper oversight because a key accountability field was optional, allowing funds to disappear into bureaucratic black holes. Now, a new mandate just made full transparency and tracking mandatory. They weren't just wasting taxpayer money, they were making it impossible to follow the trail. I've watched enough Matlock to know that that's motive and other indicators that this is a premeditated crime. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going for murder 1, baby, or financial crimes 1. Like, they meant to do this, and they meant to hide their tracks. And that implies they knew what they're doing was wrong because they didn't want to get found out. And they took measures to prevent people from figuring out what they were doing. And so now that we've figured out what they were doing, how do you respond to that, right? Like, at the end of the Matlock trial, when you find out that he knows and can prove that they hid their intentions because they knew what they were doing is wrong, that's when the people go to jail, right? Like, so probably that's what I was raised on. And then The Price is Right, right? Like, obviously. And then Law and Order in the afternoon. Viktor Orban says, that's what happened on snow days when I was a kid. Viktor Orban says, our fears have come true. The globalist liberal Soros NGO network is fleeing to Brussels after President Trump dealt a huge blow to their activities in the U.S. Now, 63 of them are asking Brussels for money under the guise of various human rights projects. Not going to happen. We will not let them find safe haven in Europe. The U.S. aid files expose the dark practices of the globalist network. We will not take the bait again. And so, like, Canada's, like Ukraine, is a state that was being used by USAID or CIA, dark forces, 3-letter agencies, whatever you want to call it, rogue state. They were using Ukraine to do bio research. They were using Ukraine, and they'd put in their own leadership into Ukraine, they being the 3-letter agencies. And I don't know, Victoria Nuland, I don't know who exactly precisely, but these are the people, the people pulling the strings, who were running Ukraine, were putting their own assets in there, doing experiments, laundering money, having big cocktail parties on the back of taxpayer funds that are laundered through there. And I think Canada could become a state like that. Canada could become this subjective state that's being utilized by the elites to launder money through and to have one facade, one public facade. But the reality of the situation is very different, right? And so we're living in a transitional phase into that situation. And I mean, it's been a few years. We've been moving into that situation for a while. As Ukraine is turned down, maybe another site will be turned up, and maybe that other site is Canada. And maybe they can hide themselves by going, like, Canada's a big country, right? So you could go from Alberta, have your base of operations in Alberta, and then all of a sudden you're in Newfoundland. You know what I mean? Maybe our laws prevent that, but it seems like something that they would do. It seems like if they can decentralize and launder money through Canada and continue their globalist network, their money laundering, maintain their power. That's their primary objective. That's what they want to do. And if they can do that through Canada, and Canada's leadership is turning a blind eye and making that super easy, then, I mean, why not move here, right? And we're already seeing that, right? And that's not good. We're already seeing signals to it. I don't know if we're seeing it necessarily, but I mean, if you look at the Vancouver method being published in newspapers saying it's easy to launder money, and then watch the RCMP talk about how we can't really stop Chinese foreign infiltration in our government because we can't even really follow the money because we have no idea what we're doing. Like, if you're a criminal and you look at that and you're like, wow, I mean, let's pick some low-hanging fruit in Canada, right? And if you're an international globalist criminal, I mean, you already own the government. So, like, you can make it easy and difficult for people like me who pointed out, right? So it's easy for the criminals, not so easy for the people saying, hey, isn't that criminal? Croc Stout says, simple question, how did $10 million for this Mozambique program, or any of the other programs totaling $729 million, get accepted as viable projects for the funding in the first place? In what way did any of these projects actually benefit the American taxpayer at all? And like, I have the same questions about Canada's contribution to billboards in African countries about pooping on the beach. Are Canadians benefiting from this? Are a lot of Canadians, because like, we have poop on our beaches in Canada. Maybe we should put those billboards in Canadian beaches. But no, they're going on to foreign beaches, right? Here's another list of things that DOGE has found. This is from the 15th. Have I gone through this already? $10 million for Mozambique, $9.7 million for UC Berkeley to develop a cohort of Cambodian youth with enterprise-driven skills. I think I read this before. A Prague Civil Society Center, improving public procurement in Serbia, $486 million to the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening, including $22 million for inclusive and participatory political process in Moldova, and $21 million for voter turnout in India. This seems like regime change stuff. $22 million. Like, if I'm a politician and I think to myself, I'm going to go up against these embedded politicians, I'm gonna do something for my country. I can't compete with $22 million of foreign U.S. funding, like, even close. No way, right? And if I'm fighting against the globalists, like, is this globalists that are funneling this money? So if I'm fighting against the globalists, they're probably not going to fund me, right? Like, so if you can't beat them, join them, right? I'll lie, become a globalist until I'm elected, and then I'll be a conservative. No, I wouldn't even be a conservative, because what are they conserving? $29 million for strengthening political landscape in Bangladesh. Again, that's regime change, Bangladesh. If you listen to Mike Benz talking about it, he seems pretty straight up, I guess. He seems pretty deep on the whole thing. So it's very interesting to hear how it's all connected, and all the money is, it's almost kind of coordinated. There's almost like a deep state finance minister who's good at bilking different taxpayers and able to, like, consolidate it and then fund NGOs and things like that. So we should just cut it all off. But right now, if the US is cut off, they're trying to do it more in the United Kingdom, more in EU, more in Germany, et cetera, et cetera. That's not good. Let's talk about the election in Canada. Pierre Poilievre says, why I'm doubling down. Everything conservatives said before the Trump tariffs is even more correct now. Axing the carbon tax, scrapping the capital gains tax hike, repealing the anti-energy law C-69, approving pipelines, celebrating, not canceling our history. These made sense before, and they are absolute necessities now. And I said yesterday, like, fine, this is fine. It's what it is. And, like, sure, axing the tax would be good. Scrapping the capital gains tax hike would be good. Repealing all of these things would be good. Different than what the liberals are proposing. But it seems like still we're not addressing the real issues. If we want to diversify away from Donald Trump in the United States, we need to build pipelines. We need to build capacity to get our oil to Tidewater. We need to break down interprovincial trade barriers for supply management and milk and things like that. And it seems like Poilievre is working on 6 months ago and not talking about the current stuff that we need to deal with, right? And I don't know. It just feels like a miss. Feels like a miss a lot. Here's another miss. Here's Poilievre talking to Candace Malcolm, and she says, are you going to be defunding the $600 million media subsidy? And he says, yeah, we're going to reduce that. And I was like, what? Cutting back on that? Cutting back on that? He fills in the details a little bit by the end, but it sounds like a flip-flop, because here he says cutting back, and then at the end he says, we're going to defund, we're going to have independent media. So, but this seems strange. Here we go.
And so just to clarify, would you get rid of that $600 million newspaper fund that Trudeau gave to newspapers?
We are going to be cutting back on that. You'll have to wait for our platform to get the details.
Okay, because...
But we have to depoliticize news media finance, because right now what happens is that there are subsidies that go to favored media outlets that CRA designates, and then there's not funding for others. So, and then of course the worst example is CBC, which gets this enormous subsidy to do largely what Canadians can get elsewhere. Canadians can get digital media, videographical media, anywhere else, and yet they're paying $1 billion+ for CBC to do that. So I think those are examples of where we need to cut, and we need to defund the CBC and have an independent, self-supporting media that can keep Canadians informed.
So defunding CBC, cut back on the $600 million subsidy, have an independent media. You know, I don't know. Ryan says Pierre gets asked if he will be getting rid of the $600 million subsidy to CBC, and he says he'll be cutting back on that. Why not just get rid of it? I'm definitely now interested to hear his full stance on this. Yeah, I don't understand why not just get rid of it either. It doesn't seem like a great idea for independent media that can fund themselves to continue with a $600 million media subsidy. So, and I wonder what kind of apparatus, like my follow-up question would be, what kind of media apparatus does the Conservative Party employ currently? What kind of media strategy do you have? And will that continue when you're the government? When the Conservative Party is government, will you continue paying influencers the way you have been? Or will there be a different way to do that? And how transparent will it be? Right? Because if you're going to get rid of if you're going to cut back on that $600 million subsidy, what is it, $5 million now? And it just goes to Juno News? Or like what? How does it work? You want to put some bones on that? That's the other thing I thought was weird. He said, oh, you'll have to wait for our platform for that. You can't freewheel? Donald Trump talked ad nauseum forever to anybody who would listen over and over and over again. And thousands of people showed up every day, every time he would do it. He would go to a place in Michigan, 10,000 people would show up, 20,000 people would show up, overflow crowds would show up. He would go to another venue in a different state, and he would do the same speech, freewheeling again, completely telling people, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. He didn't say, wait till I get elected, wait till the writ drops, wait till next week when I reveal my platform. Like, he was telling people for years what he was going to do. Why do we have to wait for your platform to drop? Like, do you not have it tailored? Like, do you not understand what's going on? Like, what is happening here, man? It's ridiculous. Rex Glazier says, what is going on now? From cutting media subsidies to reducing media subsidies, maybe. WTF, here we go again. What's next? A conservative carbon tax again. So yeah, it's if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, smells like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? Here is a gentleman, Shim Jelly Jim. He says he voted today. I think he's out in Alberta. And he says he voted today and there were Dominion machines, and he's got pictures of the Dominion machines. I don't know if it's Elections Ontario. So yeah, the Ontario since 2018 has been using Dominion tabulator machines. This one says made in the USA. In the bottom right there, you can see made in the USA, and Dominion voting, blah, blah, blah. Dominion machines had an integral part in stealing the 2020 election. So it's very interesting that they're still being used widely. And why would we trust them? Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful